get the recording going. You got it?
I got it.
You the man, Eric.
No, you the man.
Just a little shout out to our brother Eric. In case you don't know, he does a fantastic job of working with all our social media stuff, growing the church accounts and all of that, reaching out to thousands, tens of thousands of people with all of the classes and the worship service we do here, and also some Bible readings that he does. So thank you, Eric, for the work that you do, and we'll get you a raise or something, I don't know. But in any case, let's go ahead and
Yeah, double my pay.
double it. Yeah, we'll double it. Let's go ahead and open up with the word of prayer this morning. I was going to put Brad on the spot, but I will be gracious to him this morning, and I'll put Joe on the spot instead. So, Joe, would you mind leading us this morning?
Father, thank you so much for the beautiful day that you have blessed us with in this area, for your watch care, for your love, for the provisions that you give all mankind, even the ones that don't know you. We ask, Father, that as we discuss the book of James this morning and the things that our brother wrote so long ago, that we would incorporate them into our lives to serve you better and to be always ready. And we pray this in Christ. Amen.
Thank you, brother. All right, back to James. Again, remember, James, he doesn't pull any punches. He doesn't miss words. He's very direct, and the things he has to tell us are very applicable. So what I'd like to do for just a couple of moments here is go back over some of the things that he's taught us already that are actually leading into our discussion for today. We started out with the fact that faith perseveres, and he introduced in the beginning of the book the fact that we should count it all joy when we encounter various trials. God uses trials to deepen our faith. After that, we talked about the fact that faith obeys. We are to receive the word with humility, with meekness, the implanted word which is able to save our souls, and we obey the word because we believe it. Again, belief goes right along with behavior. If we've actually taken in the word of God, what he has given to us, what he has implanted into us, there ought to be some fruit coming about because of that. We obey the word because we believe it. And then last week we talked about the fact that faith loves. The love is the fruit of faith. Acts of mercy are a fruit of faith. Faith ultimately changes our actions, and we act out of love. Love is the great motivator that propels us forward and compels us to do the things that we are called to do. Today, though, we're moving forward to James chapter 2, verses 14 through 19. And this section deals with the fact that faith acts. A faith that does not act, as we'll see, is really not even a faith at all. It's a dead faith. It's useless. It's not good for anybody for any reason. James has this to say: "What good is it, my brothers, if someone says he has faith but does not have works? Can that faith save him?" He's asking this question. The obvious answer to it is no. If a brother or sister is poorly clothed and lacking in daily food, and one of you says to them, "Go in peace, be warmed and filled," without giving them the things needed for the body, what good is that? And again, the answer is no good at all. So faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. But someone will say, "You have faith and I have works. Show me your faith apart from your works, and I will show you my faith by my works. You believe that God is one, you do well. Even the demons believe and shudder." So if you didn't do your reading for this week, there it is. We got some familiarity with the passage. If you have your Bibles and you're turned to it, that's good. We'll want to follow along a little bit with some of these topics. But this is what we're working with this morning. The main idea of this text is this: faith in our hearts is evident in the fruit of our lives. You're going to know if somebody has genuine, living, saving faith because you're going to see it. It's inevitable. It's not optional. There are some main truths that we want to look at in the outline of the passage. It should be in your your handout this morning. If you don't have one, there's 2 handouts actually over by Terry. Faith in our hearts is evident in the fruit of our lives. People who fail to help poverty-stricken fellow believers are in fact not saved. Acts of mercy are not a means to salvation, but acts of mercy are necessary evidence of salvation. And ultimately, deedless faith is a useless faith. And there's some key conclusions we want to take away from this passage as well. Faith is not merely an intellectual assent. Faith is not simply an emotional response. And faith ultimately involves a willful obedience on our part. So that's what we're going to dig into this morning.
I
ahead,
ran
Joe.
across the passage yesterday in 1 John chapter 3 that kind of emulates this thought. And it's verses 17 and 18. And he's actually talking about loving one another. But he says, but whoever has the world's goods and sees his brother in need and closes his heart against him, how does the love of God abide in him? Little children, let us not love with word or with tongue, but in deed and truth. And when I read that last night, I went, whoa.
Yeah, that ties right in. If you go back to things we've talked about already, receiving the word, one of the things that impacts that is impacted by that is the way that we talk. Our tongue is going to, we're going to try and tame it if we've actually received the word as we're supposed to. How we deal with different people, whether they're the rich or the poor, that's going to change because, well, we've received the word and we're all in need of God's grace. That great equalizer has come into play. We're not showing favoritism towards certain people anymore. Faith received ought to change us radically. It ought to change everything about us to one degree or another and increasingly over time. So thank you for bringing that up, Joe. Any other comments or questions before we dig in? All right, we will move forward. So a couple points of the passage we want to focus on. In this passage, James converses with this imaginary person. He uses this hypothetical individual. And this person claims to have faith, but that person also does not have any deeds that support that claim. This is a person who has no deeds, a person who claims that you can really separate faith from works. James's point is that this person does not really have faith to begin with. James is not contrasting somebody. Here's something we got to bear in mind. He's not contrasting someone who has, let's say, an immature faith that perhaps isn't being as fruitful as somebody who has a mature faith. He's also not contrasting the nominal faith with an authentic faith. What he is saying is that you either have a faith that saves or you do not. He's very black and white about this. You're either saved and you have a living, saving faith that is evident, or you do not. Again, he doesn't pull punches, he doesn't mince words.
So then the question comes, how do you know?
How do you know? Well, we're going to get into it. It's a good question. Faith in our hearts is evident by the fruit of our lives. James tells us that it's actually possible for somebody to claim to have faith. They can say it outwardly, but not actually have it on the inside. To claim to have faith and really not even be saved. We can know if someone has faith because we see faith's fruits. What are some of the fruits that we might see of faith?
Galatians 5.
Galatians, so like the fruit of the Spirit? All right. Things like love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, good, those sorts of things. How are those things expressed? Do you keep those to yourself or do they get expressed in some way?
Share your love and your compassion.
Yeah.
It's an action.
How do I know that you love me and how do you know that I love you? You're going to see it.
Right.
How do you know that I have the fruit of patience that the Spirit gives me in my life? Hopefully you see it.
You're not going to hit him with a
too.
Right? You come at me, I'm not gonna take the bat to you, and you're not gonna take the bat to me. What about kindness and goodness and self-control? It's going to be evident that God has worked in our lives in such a way that change has come about.
Right.
James is not telling us to add works to our faith to be saved. Rather, he's saying that the works born out of faith prove our faith to be true and living, saving faith. They're two different things. They're very subtle, and there's a handout we'll go to here in just a little bit to try and put a picture on that point. And what this really means, though, is that if there is no fruit, that doesn't mean just, maybe you got some fruit here and there. If there's none, there's no evidence whatsoever, then clearly there is no faith. And clearly there's no salvation because of that.
Let me ask you another question.
Go ahead.
So does this follows what he was just talking about in chapter 1 about being a doer?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yes. Before this point, James has talked about being doers of the word, not hearers only, deceiving ourselves. If we just hear it, if we just say it, and nothing comes about, we've bought into the lie that we've told ourselves that everything is good when everything really isn't good. And so we want to be doers of the word. It's going to be evidenced in a changed tongue and changed actions with each other, in deeds of mercy, acts of mercy, that sort of thing. But there's a difference between adding works to a faith that really is no different than the faith that the demons have, and works being born out of a living faith. And so if you have that other handout, it should look something like this. On the one side, you have a fruitful tree that is bearing fruit all its own. On the other side, you have a tree that has no fruit on it, but somebody going and presumably just stapling it to the tree, or maybe using duct tape and hanging up things up there. One of these we would classify as a living faith. The other one we can classify as faith plus works. One side, one side, the fruit is the result of what's going on in the tree. Life is pumping through the tree, it's producing things naturally. The other one, there's actually nothing going on in the tree to produce life, but it looks like there's something going on there. The difference is subtle, and we want to make sure that we're on the right side of this. Both trees might have fruit on them. One tree bore fruit, and the other had fruit added to it. One evidences life, and the other one just resembles it. It is possible to even look like we're having works of faith, but when in fact, it's really just lip service. It might look like the real deal, when it may not in fact actually be the real deal. One is the result of a living faith, one is not, at the end of the day. Comments or questions there? I believe there's a little bit more explanation on your handouts. Those are for you to keep and consult. But we just don't have the time to get into all of that. But if you have comments or questions on that before we move forward, now's a good time to ask or whatever. While I get a drink.
The comment you have here in section 2 there, our faith can be lifeless, but we can still do good things because of other reasons that are unrelated to faith.
Mm-hmm. So you might have, this brings up the idea of motivators. You're either motivated by a genuine faith that abides in you, or maybe you're motivated by things like fear or guilt. I don't actually want to do this, but I'm afraid if I don't, consequences. I don't actually want to do this, but I'm afraid of how I might look if I don't. You're being motivated by guilt. Rather than, I want to do this because I have a changed heart for what God's done for me and what He's doing in my life.
Or it could be related to some kind of a reward.
Mm-hmm. What am I going to get out of this? There's good motivators and there's bad.
So and there are a lot of people who still, they show their faith and their works in the fact that they're The motivator is working their way to heaven.
Mhm.
They haven't figured that out yet.
Yes. Yeah, that very much exists. Terry?
The one says they honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me.
Yeah. That's a great point to bring up. They honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. I think it's Matthew 7. Jesus says, not all who say to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. They say, well, Lord, I did this, and I did this, and I did this. They went and did all of these things, but where was their heart? It wasn't operating out of faith. It was operating from some other thing. And I think that's really what's being talked about here in James. So that's good to bring up, Terry. Anybody else? Comments, questions, concerns, criticism? Ellie?
Is this a good passage to go to when you're trying to tell someone that baptism is needed? I mean, you show them the scriptures, yes, you need to do this, this, and this, and then they say, no, you don't need to do any works whatsoever.
Who is doing the operative work in baptism? Is it us, or is God doing something?
Right.
That's the point you really want to drive home there. It's not as though I'm earning it or meriting it or anything like that and submitting to being baptized. God is the one who is operating in that procedure to bring about that saving work.
But it also involves willful obedience.
It does involve obedience.
And that's,
How do you know that we have that living faith operating within us? Because we willfully obey. If you're being baptized against your will, what good is that? Right? If you have this living faith being born in you, you're going to want to obey what the Lord has decreed for us to do. It's a good question, Alan. Anybody else? Terry?
I think we already said it. It says the devil believes,
Mm-hmm.
trembles.
Yes,
He's not saved by any stretch.
that's right. Yeah, it's beyond that just intellectual assent. It's beyond even the emotional. There's more to a biblical living faith than those two things. And for some people, that's all it is. It's just I feel something, or I think something. And that's not it. Brad, do you have your hand up? Or
No. I mean, I got thoughts, but I don't know.
you got thoughts?
Yeah, well, when,
Uh-oh. Go ahead, Joe. Take over.
I'm gonna say some of these for later too.
Oh, boy.
But, you know, when I first started reading this, I thought almost as if this was, you know, you having your thing that's, you know, conversing with an imaginary person, but I'm envisioning James talking to somebody who is like, well, Paul said, you know, Ephesians 2, for by grace you are saved through faith, not of yourselves, as the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast.
Mhm.
And he's almost addressing that head on and trying to clarify maybe
Mhm.
some misteachings that they had, or misunderstanding of what, not misteaching, but misunderstanding of what was meant.
What they're doing, they're addressing two different sides of the same issue, and that is actually going to be covered extensively next week. You won't be here, right?
I will be on YouTube.
Oh, okay. Oh,
I do work next week.
all right. Well, maybe write down your questions and send them with your family. But we will get into that in more detail because that is a crucial point in all this. So hang on. Anybody else? All right, we'll move forward. Continuing in the same line of thought that faith in our heart is evident by the fruit of our lives. Remember, James is echoing Jesus's teachings here. One place we can see that is Matthew chapter 7, verse 20, where Jesus says, "Thus you will recognize them by their fruits." You're going to know a good tree or a bad tree by what it's producing. He says you're not going to get good stuff from this, you're not going to get good stuff from that. You will get good stuff from this, you will get good stuff from that, but there's no crossing between them. You're going to recognize people by their fruits. What you see on the outside is indicative of what's on the inside. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago with the tongue. How do we know what's in the heart? Out of the abundance of the heart, what? Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth
Yeah.
speaks.
Yeah,
All right.
the mouth speaks.
You're going to know what's in here by what comes out here. Terry?
Not what goes into the mouth, but what comes out.
Yep. Yep. So our tongue gives us away, and our actions give us away as to what's really going on in our hearts. We ought to see good, genuine deeds done out of faith as evidence of what's going on in our hearts. All right. So James introduces that whole idea, and then he brings in this example of some fellow believers who have come on some pretty hard times. People who fail to help poverty-stricken fellow believers are in fact not saved. Ouch, James. Are you serious about that? Yeah, he is. James illustrates his point with the example of a severely afflicted fellow brother or sister. And this hypothetical person claims to have faith and yet does nothing to help the brother or sister. James says that that person's faith is useless, dead, and really no faith at all. It is no good. No good whatsoever. You look at the phrase there where he says, be warmed and be filled. Well, that can be translated a couple of different ways, and either way you translate it is not good. To be warmed and filled can be warm and fill yourself. Do it all yourself. Or it could be translated stay warm and well fed, as though the need has already been met and they're just imagining things. It's not that bad. You'll just take care of yourself. So it's not good to see the need and reject the opportunity to help in some way. Really shows what's going on in here. It says, I don't care, don't love that individual, and it's a reflection of the fact that a living, saving faith has not taken up root in that person's heart. Joe.
Okay, here we're seeing a fellow brother or sister.
Mm-hmm.
What about the fellow on the street?
So this is, we'll say this is the extreme example. So the extreme example is, this is somebody who's in your God's family, somebody who ought to be close to you and who's in need, and you won't even help them. And this person is ultimately condemned because of that. What do you think it's any better for just the person we see hurting?
No,
Out there.
because we're given instruction, do good unto all men.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that kind of ties in.
Yeah. This is especially the household of faith.
The household.
You won't even help the person in the household of faith.
Yeah. So
Like-
why are you going to go and help some stranger?
Yeah. Ellie.
This reminds me of Jesus feeding the 5,000.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
They were in need.
Yep. Yep. And he called on his disciples to feed them.
And they had other ideas, you know.
Yeah.
Send them home. Well,
Send 'em
let
home.
them
Let them warm and fill
themselves.
themselves. Yeah. Eric?
I had a debate whether I wanted to go here.
Uh-oh. You and your brother causing problems in life.
But our general attitude for people that are not of faith and live a lifestyle that's not exactly in line with our Christian beliefs, it's like, well, that's an evil lifestyle, and we need to stay away from evil. Well, how are we supposed to help those,
Mm-hmm.
especially them, that definitely need it?
Yeah.
If we have the attitude, well, they're evil and we need to stay away from evil, that's, I kind of feel like it's misinterpreting the message
Mm-hmm.
a little bit. And that kind of, these verses, that verse, what you're saying here is kind of reminding me of how those two ideas contradict themselves.
Yeah. Well, you see here, James is talking about two very obvious real needs that have especially been present there. Remember, he's just talked about orphans and widows just a few verses before, and how we have to care for such individuals. You see some guy who's freezing out on the street, you know exactly what that need is that needs addressed. And if we had the ability to meet that need, say, okay, well, I can run down to Browse and Buy and get a $2 sweatshirt, and now that's an obvious need. The guy's starving to death on the side of the road. Well, go get him some food.
Right.
That's a very direct, obvious need. Some needs are not so obvious, but some are very much obvious, and to just, I don't care about that. That reveals
Even if
something.
they don't want the help, if you get shit, what Joe, you always say, put the pebble in the shoe, sometimes that's enough
Yeah.
for
Stone
that
issue.
moment.
And you run into that too sometimes, where somebody just refuses to be helped. Yeah, I don't know what to do in that situation necessarily when they just reject it outright, but you ought to have the inclination and try to do something, I would say, rather than just, well, good luck, buddy. Like,
You made your bed.
yeah, make your bed, go sleep then. Anybody else? Comments, questions?
Or
Brad?
God's day.
Brad and then Terry.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, when someone rejects you, that's where prayer comes into play and God changes hearts.
Mhm.
When talking about abstaining from appearances of evil, don't try not, you're afraid to help somebody because they may be living a sinful lifestyle, for example. Kind of reminds me of in Isaiah, I don't have this thought completely through, but when, was it a coal touched his
Isaiah
mouth,
6.
it transferred purity over to him as opposed to his evil to that.
Mhm.
So kind of a metaphor there on that front, but anyway.
Yeah, that's a good thought. Sometimes the need that we see isn't always something physical. There might be some spiritual needs that you could address. That, a lot of us in the United States are not starving to death. Some people are, but most people aren't. But there's some spiritual needs that might need to be addressed, that you might be able to pray for that individual or get them some kind of contact with a Christian counselor or something like that. There's all kinds of ways to help. And the inclination of our heart needs to be, I want to act in a merciful way towards those around me who do have needs. So, all right, we need to move forward here a little bit. Remember, our acts of mercy, the things that we're doing towards people, are not the means to salvation, they are the evidence of it. There's that difference between I'm earning my way and God has made the way, and this is the fruit of that. Two different ways of going about it. Acts of mercy are the natural overflow of a heart properly oriented towards God and others. If our heart is oriented towards God, if it's oriented towards others out of love, you're going to see the evidence of that. Terry.
This is hard. We've talked about it before. Somebody standing beside the road and says, I'm hungry. And I know I sometimes off and on will give them money. But some say, well, you can go get them a sandwich. But to do that, you gotta go down the road, come back, and circle back around. It's just a bad situation that you're in. Do you give them $1 or $2, or you just going? The thing that bothers me more than anything is when I see the same guy out there all the time.
Mhm.
That bothers me. But
Yep.
That's
I'd say there's probably a personal preference on that one. One's convenient, one's not. One's more personal approach. One is, here you go, I'll give you the stuff that you need to do it yourself. You gotta make your own call on that. The fruit of faith is mercy towards others. We're going to see that fruit. Mercy is not an optional addition to being a Christian. It's not an option. Rather, a life poured out in deeds of mercy is the sign of genuine faith. And sometimes we think, well, somebody else can do it. Somebody else will do it. And I'll do my thing and pay some other guy to do it, you know, but we all have the opportunity and the obligation to do acts of mercy.
He actually mentions this in verse 12 and 13. He talks about mercy. So speak and so act as those who are to be judged by the law of liberty, for judgment will be merciless to one who has shown no mercy. Mercy triumphs over judgment. So he's actually expounding on the mercy aspects because of the actions of faith.
Yes. Yep. I'm not sure what to say to your point, but yeah,
I
that's
mean,
it.
no mercy, you know, you're just, I mean, like we were talking about the guy at the roadside or something like that, and you don't show any mercy. I mean, you could say a prayer or something for him, but that's like being warmed and filled. And I guess it's a judgment call.
Hey Joe, how many times do you think God puts us in those situations, whether we want to be in them or not? They give us an opportunity to
Yeah, well,
show
for
mercy.
just such a time as this.
Yeah. Whether you want to or not. I mean, you see it sprinkled throughout the entire Bible, putting people in situations they don't want to be in. But it's not for the it's not only for the betterment of you, but it's also for others.
Yeah.
Like Jonah and Abraham. It's like, you're gonna do it. You're gonna be faced with these.
Well, back to your point, Joe, you know, just a few verses before this, James is talking about we need to show mercy, because if we don't, no mercy's shown us. The last point on our slide here is deeds of mercy are the evidence that God has wrought mercy in you. If God's mercy has sunk in and hit home, the fruit of that is going to be, well, I need to show mercy, and I will show mercy. Now that comes up in the Beatitudes as well. Blessed are the merciful.
Yeah.
Well, they will receive mercy. How do you know that God's mercy has been applied to me? How do you know it's been applied to you? Well, we are now inclined to issue that out to others. As somebody who's received it, I want to give it. God's mercy changes us. That's the point. Our faith and all the things that God has done in us and through us changes us.
So that's actually a godlike character.
Mm-hmm. How do I know God has worked in my heart an act of mercy? It's because I now give it. It's the evidence. That's James' whole point through this section is you're going to see that God has done something in your life. If you don't see it, you might need to be a little introspective and see what's going on. Terry?
It says too, it's better to give than receive.
It is better to give than to receive. But we have to receive God's mercy to give it. We can't give what we don't have. So, very good. Onward we go. If somebody has their Bibles, if you wouldn't mind opening up to Matthew 25, and we'll read through 31 and 40 and bring this thought forward here a little bit. But what I want us to see in this passage, Jesus makes this point, that God's mercy in man transforms man to become merciful by faith. Matthew 25, 31 through 40. Go ahead and read that. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and the angels with him, then he will sit on his glorious throne. Before him will be gathered all the nations. He will separate one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will place the sheep on his right and the goats on the left. And then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you before the foundation of the world. For I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me, and I was in prison and you came to me. Then the righteous will answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? And when did we see you a stranger and welcome you, and naked and clothe you? And when did we see you sick or in prison and visit you? And the king will answer them, truly I say to you, as you did to one of the least of these my brothers, you did to me. We see that the mercy of God has been wrought in these individuals' heart, and the result of that is now they go and show mercy to other people. Ministering to the poor brother or sister in Christ is equated here to ministering to Christ himself. In a real way, Christ is in that brother or sister to whom you are ministering in their need. So is it possible for a Christian to see Christ hungry and thirsty, or hungry and not feed him? Is it possible for a Christian to see Christ thirsty and not give him something to drink? Absolutely not. The overflow of the Christian's heart is to serve, and the Christian's external acts of mercy are clear evidence of the internal mercy of God in his heart. When we see a brother or sister in need, we need to see Christ in need. When we serve our brother and sister in need, we need to serve as though we're serving Jesus in need. That's James' point. That's Jesus' point. And again, it's that evidence that something has happened in our hearts. With this, guilt and fear are not the motivators that we need to have when serving people's needs. And sometimes that's all it amounts to. I'm afraid of how I might look if I don't. I'm afraid of what might happen to me if I don't. That's different than operating out of faith. We don't serve because we must, rather because the mercy that we have received by faith compels us to serve. We serve because our hearts have been transformed by God's mercy, and God's mercy now overflows from our lives. That is a changed life. Terry.
I said this last week, I believe. We have to be looking to see, because we can just bypass.
Yeah.
And we're not really looking.
Yep. I think sometimes we recognize what James says here about saying to a brother and sister, be warmed and filled, and we say, well, I don't want to do that. So if I just keep blinders on, I won't see it, and then I'm not responsible. We don't want to do that either. Ultimately, deedless faith is a useless faith. Works, deeds, and actions are not optional for those who have faith. They are inevitable. If it's genuine living faith, it's going to happen. It's inevitable. Faith without works is useless to your brother and sister in need because it doesn't serve them, it doesn't help them in any way. And at the same time, faith without works is useless to you because it's a faith that cannot save you, because it's not real. It's not real faith. It's that self-deceived mental assent that sometimes we can have. Biblical faith is not merely intellectual assent. In your handouts, it talks about the fact that the demons believe, but the demons aren't saved. Faith is not merely a emotional response. What else do the demons do? They believe and they what? Shudder. They feel something about the truth that they know. They know that Jesus is Lord. They know what's coming. They know the truth. They believe the truth. They feel something very strongly towards the truth, but they're not saved. Faith then involves something beyond intellectual assent and even strong feelings. Faith involves a willful obedience. You show your faith not just by what you think or by what you feel, but by what you do. Faith acts. If your faith consists merely of listening to the word, talking about the word, or feeling a certain way about the word, your faith is dead. Faith acts on the word. Faith in our hearts is evident in the fruit of our lives. If all our faith does is sit in a pew on a Sunday morning and doesn't change us, doesn't prompt us to serve and love and do acts of mercy, we might not need to be thinking about some things. We'll put it that way. So here's our homework. Keep everything we talked about in mind. Good luck. You got handouts, study up. And be ready to bring some of this stuff forward into next week. Our homework is to read James chapter 2, verses 20 through 24. This is one of the most wonderful passages and even most controversial passages in the New Testament. But the idea of that passage that the faith that saves always produces good works and is based on God's saving work in Jesus Christ. So let's read up and be prepared to discuss next week. We got a little bit of time left if there's any comments or questions for today. Otherwise, we'll get ready to worship.
So the statement from Paul in Philippians, work out your salvation in fear and trembling, how does that tie in with this?
So the salvation that we have is supposed to be a sure thing that we then exercise. It's not as though I'm working to gain salvation. It's a salvation that I already have that I then put to good use and work it out. I kind of think like if you get a massage, you got a lump in your back that needs to be worked out. You have something that's already there, but then you do something with it to get rid of it. But in this case, it's a salvation that we already have, that we put to good use. We exercise it, that sort of thing.
So putting your faith into practice.
Putting your faith in practice.
Well, we know that we're saved by faith.
We're saved by faith. And how do we know we're saved by faith?
By applying the word to our life.
We see the fruit of it. We see the fruit of that faith. Very good. All right, thank you all for your attention. Let's get ready to work.